Well, joining us right now is ESPN NFL Nation reporter Courtney Cronin, now covering the Bears, but you guys might remember her as covering the Vikings not long ago. Courtney, how have you been? This has been a tough year for the Bears that in your home city, I guess you could say, but how has it been covering this team?
It's been a roller coaster because you go back to the preseason, Tatum, and all of the high expectations that came with Caleb Williams coming to Chicago, the first time the team had drafted a #1 overall pick quarterback. And the hope was, at least the belief was, he was coming to a place that he had all the infrastructure he needed to succeed and take off right away. Now, reality met with expectation met with reality was that he had a 1-2 start. They made some changes to the offense. They rattle off 3 straight wins, go into the bye week, and then coming out of the bye week, we all know what happened in Washington. A day that's highlighted by the Hail Mary that the Bears wish they were on the other side of. But even before then, the offense wasn't performing well. There were 2 more games of the offense looking the way that it did during a stretch where it felt like Caleb kind of regressed. It led to a switch at offensive coordinator when Shane Waldron was fired after 9 games and replaced by Thomas Brown. And for as chaotic as it's been and as chaotic as that loss was to the Green Bay Packers by 1 point, I think there's some positives that the team feels they're able to take away from the way that the offense was able to play after switching coordinators and being able to see the quarterback get back on track.
Yeah, what did Thomas Brown change or maybe inspire in Caleb Williams that Shane Waldron's departure kind of sparked when Coach Brown took over?
I think the biggest thing when Caleb says that he felt they were in more control, that starts with getting the play call in quicker and probably in a more efficient manner for the quarterback to the point where he can relay it to 10 other guys on offense and get set long before, or at least a couple seconds before, it takes him to snap the ball. So he doesn't feel as rushed. So it started there at the line of scrimmage before the ball is even snapped to adding in elements of this into this offense that bring out the strengths of these players, not just Caleb Williams, but the 3 receivers that the Bears are very fond of between DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, utilizing the run game in ways that it wasn't the last couple of weeks and trying to get your guys in space. And how'd they do that? They established a much shorter passing game for Caleb Williams, who is still working through some of the chemistry issues he's having with his receivers and being able to establish a deeper passing attack. To simplify it by having more passes thrown at, behind the line of scrimmage, screens, being able to get your receivers involved there as well, helped Caleb get to a rhythm. And he's getting the ball out very quickly. Like when I asked Matt Eberflus about that today, just knowing who the opponent is in week 12 here with the Minnesota Vikings coming to town, expecting a very ferocious blitz from Brian Flores and his defense. That was among the first things that Eberflus pointed out, that one of Caleb's best attributes is getting the ball out quickly. Certainly we know how that worked against the Green Bay Packers, which, for most measures are a top 10 defense. And to see that coming up against an even better defense, that being the approach for the offense to take, I think just plays better to how your quarterback succeeds, how he learns, and how you can put him in the best position to take advantage of an opponent.
That's right. Caleb Williams is currently the most sacked quarterback in the league. Brian Flores, 7-1 against rookie quarterbacks all time. So when you know those stats going into this and knowing how sack happy this team is, how much pressure Brian Flores is able to put on a quarterback, especially a quarterback who may not be used to seeing the fronts in front of him, how do you think the Bears offense will fare?
You're right about the sacks. Like that to me, I think is where everything starts. For Thomas Brown, when he came in to this role a week ago yesterday, it was priority #1, keep your quarterback upright. Caleb Williams had been sacked 15 times in 2 games. And, the more hits you take, the less confidence your quarterback has back there. So I think it was mitigating some of those issues up front with protection. Certainly, it helped that he got both his starting left tackle and his starting right tackle back. He didn't have that against Arizona, and in Washington they were dealing with O-line injuries. So that's part 1. But I think scheming up some of the quick throws, being able to put Caleb in position to get the ball out of his hands in 3 seconds or less versus having to hold on to it. And sometimes you have to. I mean, certainly you look at the final drive for the Bears where it's 3rd and 19. he drops back to pass, doesn't see anything, and he's buying himself some time, avoiding a sack, rolling out, scrambling to his right, getting out of the pocket. Those things mean that you're holding onto the ball a little bit longer, but there was still progress and production coming out of that. So I would think that given how often he's been blitzed this season, I mean, he faced his highest blitz percentage, which was nearly 42% of his dropbacks 2 weeks ago against the New England Patriots. So he has experience with this, and they that's a team that sacked him 8 times, and 6 of those came off of the Patriots sending an extra defender. So there's the institutional knowledge, I would say, that he has now, knowing how teams are going to attack this offense, that will at least give him a baseline for how you go into this game against the Vikings, expecting that and then some with all of these exotic looks that Brian Flores' unit has put on teams.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, this Vikings team, it felt like heading into this season, there were a lot of critics out there not expecting them to do much. In fact, head coach Kevin O'Connell in his post-game press conference was like, I'm old enough to remember when no one believed in us. So that wasn't that long ago for him. The team is now 8-2. What surprised you the most about what this 2024 Vikings team has done?
I think it all starts with the quarterback position. Of course, when J.J. McCarthy goes down with the injury and you're wondering, how is Sam Darnold going to fare in this offense? Because the last couple of years of his career, he's been a journeyman. He's bounced around a couple of different places. So to see the true career resurgence for him under Kevin O'Connell, in the right system where he is super successful and the offense is able to become one of the best in the NFC, that is probably, the biggest surprise, because everywhere else it felt like the quarterback question marks were erased. Certainly not in Detroit, certainly not in Green Bay going into the season after they got the Jordan Love extension done. And then in Chicago, the expectation was that Caleb Williams was going to come along a little bit quicker than he has to this point. And then it left Minnesota wondering, okay, they lost some players that were staples of this team in previous years to free agency. They replaced some of those players, like the Jonathan Gernard, Danielle Hunter, like swap that happened in free agency. Of course, bringing in Andrew Van Ginkel, and he had some injuries. You're wondering, how is that going to play out in this defense? Very clearly, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah put a lot of thought into how the new pieces of this roster would work, including the quarterback position, and it's a gamble that paid off. So a team that's 8-2 right now, it's wild that we don't talk about them more, I think, at this point. And certainly the NFC North is kind of like the SEC of NFL football, because there's these teams that are just going to cannibalize each other over the next 7 weeks, especially, the Bears' schedule. They've got, including Green Bay last week, they've got 6 division games in the final 8 weeks. That stretch is unheard of. I remember going back in May when the schedule came out to look to see the last time they would have played that many division games in a row, more or less. And I couldn't find it, not within, my lifetime. So to see that, and then to see how, how thin the margin of error is in the NFC North. You look no further than the Vikings-Lions game at US Bank Stadium a couple of weeks ago to show you that sometimes it's that close, that margin, that determines a winner and a loser in arguably the most competitive division in the NFL this season.
Yeah, it is quite funny. I love the SEC comparison. That's very relatable. I mean, you look at it, it's just unprecedented. I was talking with our podcast guest this week just about how this team may feel the pressure, whether they like it or not, because they have to keep up in this race of just their division, not just the entire NFC or the entire NFL. One of those guys who's feeling a little bit of pressure this season, however, is Justin Jefferson, and that's because defenses have been attacking him in very strategic ways. Kevin O'Connell this week talking about how he hopes people are noticing the ways that defenses are playing Justin Jefferson. How do you think the Bears will play that?
Well, I had this question. PA asked me this question this morning about whether Jalen Johnson is going to shadow Justin Jefferson. They don't do that within this defense. They play their sides, and that's, sometimes that means Jefferson will be on the Bears' #1 corner. Other times it means that that's a Tyreek Stevenson assignment, and they'll move guys around to try to, that's one player that you don't just have a one-on-one matchup with more times than not. You're going to use bracket coverage, cloud coverage, whatever you have to do, because once he gets on the back, past your last line of defense, it's usually not good for opposing teams. And I know that, having covered him the first 2 years of his career, and then having seen just how incredible of a talent he is. I was taking a look at the numbers earlier today, just like seeing how soon he's going to be like surpassing his next career milestone. And that's why, like, 6,811 career receiving yards, which is the most by a player in his first 5 seasons in NFL history. As if this guy like can't get any better. It's like he keeps upping the ante on himself every year. And it's really cool for me to see that, having covered him at the onset of his NFL career. But like those matchups in the secondary, which is the strength of this Bears defense, but at the same time, they're dealing with some injuries there in terms of depth. They have an injury at safety right now that, they're right now down to their third string safety because Jaquan Brisker's out, Elijah Hicks has an ankle injury, and then it's fill in the blank, question mark. We'll figure out who they put back there on Sunday. Those are matchups that I expect the Vikings to exploit. But also knowing that you have a cornerback who is one of the best in the NFL right now, second team All-Pro last year, got paid, and he's going to be with the Bears for a very long time. That is the matchup that I hope we get to see more often than not. But I also know that, the Vikings are going to want to put Justin Jefferson in a position where he can get open as often as he can, despite how much added attention is going to be thrown his way.
Yes, it's been a few games since we've seen JJ do the gritty in the end zone. And I love the point that you make about upping the ante, because think about last season. He was only in there for half of the year, and he's only been half of a season here. So it's almost like he got that many yards in one full season, but I'm no mathematician. Thank you so much to ESPN's Courtney Cronin for joining us here for this interview. Courtney, we look forward to seeing you on Sunday as the Vikings go for their 5th straight win over Chicago at Soldier Field.